Warner Bros. Games Montreal did not announce a headline. The first signals surfaced where modern layoffs appear through LinkedIn status changes and farewell notes from staff. Gaming press track posts by Siri Young, Camille Olivier Paquette, and Nicolas Pereira. 3 names, 3 posts, 3 separations from studio roles. That is not a press release, but it is a flare. And when you see one flare, you look for the next, because flares rarely fire alone. Here is what you did not get. You did not get a corporate statement with a number. No roadmap update that explains why March 2026 needed reductions inside a studio tied to one of the biggest brands on the planet. You got silence, and you got the internet doing what it always does with silence, it fills it fast. Recruiter tags, open role signals, fragments of social posts, and the kind of whisper network that thrives on uncertainty. Silence becomes the operating condition, and the rumor engine fills the gap, because people hate ambiguity more than they hate bad news. Now listen to this part, because this is where the pressure hits real people. This absence is not neutral. It becomes pressure, and it forces every remaining employee to guess. And when everyone guesses, the darkest guess wins the room, because fear moves faster than hope. The company avoids a statement, but it does not avoid consequences. The consequences land on staff, still inside the building, on the public, watching from outside, and on the next hiring cycle that depends on trust. You cannot ask a team to hold a line, while you refuse to tell them what the line is. This is where the operational reality kicks in hard. Development pipelines require sustained labor during pre-production, prototyping, vertical slice work, and the long grind of content building. Cuts that hit narrative, level design, and production are not trimming the edges. Those roles are the steering wheel, they are hands on the controls. People want to pretend they are overhead, but they are not. They are the plan, the pacing, the cohesion, the reason a project becomes a game instead of a pile of assets. When those functions take hits, you are not saving weight, you are changing direction, or slowing down, or handing off. That is why March 2026 matters, even if you only see a few names in public. Now let us talk about what the studio means. Warner Bros. Games Montreal carries a DC-focused legacy through Batman, Arkham Origins, and Gotham Knights. That history built a brand association between Montreal and Gotham-centered games. Gotham Knights shipped in 2022. After that, public visibility went thin, sparse official updates, no clear new title, no steady drumbeat. When a studio goes quiet, the public starts reading shadows. And the shadows get louder when the brand is DC, because DC is not a side project. DC is supposed to be a pillar. A pillar does not wobble like this. A pillar does not go dark for years, then bleed staff, then ask for patience, then act surprised when players stop believing. You have also seen the pattern before. Industry reporting, during December 2024, described 99 job losses at Warner Bros. Games Montreal. Many of the affected workers were described as subcontractors tied to keywords and quality assurance. The report framed it as significant and connected it to broader turbulence inside Warner Bros. Games, turbulence that kept spreading. When you stack that beside March 2026, you do not get a one-time correction. You get a repeated contraction signal. Multi-round reductions often accompany project cancellations, mandate shifts, or consolidation toward fewer flagship teams, even when nobody says the word cancel. This is how signals turn into intelligence, and this is why the community starts treating silence as a warning label. And here is the uncomfortable part, the part people try to wave away with optimism. Fans are not stupid, developers are not naive, recruiters are not blind. When the same studio appears in reduction headlines, again and again, the market stops treating it like a bump, it treats it like a trend. That is how you lose talent before you even post the listing. That is how you lose candidates who would have stabilized the next project. People do not line up to join a unit that looks like it is being thinned before deployment. Warner Bros. Games has also told the public it is refocusing on 4 tentpole franchises: Harry Potter, Game of Thrones, Mortal Kombat, and DC. Shareholder messaging described renewed concentration on core brands as a corrective response to scattered investments and recent financial disappointments. Refocus language is easy to say, but it carries operational consequences. A DC pillar implies stable investment in DC game teams. Yet reductions at a DC-associated studio raise doubts about DC pipeline stability, especially when the cuts touch multiple disciplines, instead of a single overflow function. And this is where it starts sounding like 2 different companies speaking at once. One voice says focus, pillars, tentpoles. The other voice cuts teams, cuts planning, cuts continuity, then calls it alignment. Those voices do not match. The audience notices and the staff notices more. If you want the context for why skepticism is so sharp, look at February 2025. Reporting described a major shakeup across Warner Bros. Games, including cancellation of a Wonder Woman game and closure of several studios, with major outlets describing cost-cutting and strategic realignment. After that, DC planning faces an optics problem. Confidence depends on consistent output, transparent roadmaps, and steady staffing. Additional reductions at a DC-adjacent studio amplify skepticism among players, investors, and prospective hires. This is not cruelty, it is the market, plain and cold. The market does not grade on effort. The market grades on delivery. You can say the right words and still fail. You can promise a comeback and still ship nothing. And when your last big DC headline is a cancellation, you do not get the benefit of the doubt, you earn doubt by default. There is another layer here that people miss. Warner Bros. Games Montreal has supported other Warner Bros. Projects. Assistance work on Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League has been described in reporting tied to the December 2024 coverage. Support, not ownership. Support roles can sustain employment, and support can keep a unit alive. But support rarely earns branding benefits, and it can hide mission drift. Mission drift is how studios die quietly, not with a closure announcement, not with a dramatic ending, but with years of being the spare parts department. You stop being a team with ownership, and you become a team with tasks. Tasks do not build identity, pride, or a roadmap anyone can believe. Here is where the craft details matter. Narrative functions shape world logic, mission goals, dialogue pipelines, performance capture planning. Level design translates narrative beats into playable spaces, encounter rhythm, traversal logic, pacing controls. Production holds schedules, risk registers, vendor coordination, cross-team communication. When reductions span narrative, level design, and production, you are looking at broad disruption. That kind of disruption usually arrives during direction changes or pipeline pauses, because late pre-production produces fewer deliverables to manage, and leadership starts cutting what it thinks it can postpone. But when you lose planners, builders, and coordinators at the same time, the plan is moving. And if the plan is moving, the least you can do is say that out loud, not secret details, not forbidden specifics, just basics: mandate, focus, timeline. Because right now, the only people communicating clearly are the ones being pushed out the door. And that is upside down. Without an official layoff count, you cannot assess the impact. Labor impact depends on magnitude, seniority distribution, role concentration. Headcount opacity invites rumor and exaggeration. Fear rises among remaining staff. Recruitment weakens, especially when external candidates see repeated reductions in public view. LinkedIn posts become the de facto disclosure mechanism: job titles, time served, personal notes signaling job searches. Those posts provide human clarity. Corporate silence provides procedural ambiguity. Human clarity without corporate context encourages narratives of retreat, and narratives of retreat spread faster than any official correction that comes too late. Warner Bros. Games has used the language of optimization, alignment, and prioritization in public communications around restructuring. Optimization protects executive flexibility. Flexible language avoids binding promises about projects, staffing, and release windows. Flexible language can also erode trust when layoffs continue. That is the cycle: soft words, open options, no commitment, then surprise when nobody believes the commitments you do make. Trust is not a toggle. Trust is a ledger. Every vague statement is a withdrawal. Every silent layoff is a withdrawal. Eventually the account hits zero, and then even good news sounds like spin. Continuity is the real currency of game development. Continuity preserves code knowledge, tooling habits, content standards, and team rhythm. Disruptions increase bug rates, rework, onboarding costs, schedule volatility. A publisher promising a 2027 to 2028 resurgence requires continuity during 2026 build phases, because the build is where the muscle is formed. Warner Bros. Games has suffered high-profile setbacks during the mid-2020s, and commercial disappointment around Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League has been noted in coverage tied to restructuring. Setbacks trigger shareholder scrutiny. Scrutiny drives conservative portfolio management and aggressive cost controls across studios and contractors. Cost controls protect margins, and they also starve creative exploration. Creative starvation produces sequels optimized for predictability. Innovation shrinks inside gameplay loops, narrative risk, visual identity. And that is how you end up with safe games that still fail, because safe does not mean good, safe means familiar, and familiar does not excite anyone, does not justify the budget, does not rebuild a reputation. So yes, March 2026 layoffs matter beyond three visible names. They signal continued volatility inside a studio expected to contribute to a DC pillar. Volatility undermines multi-year roadmaps, because roadmaps rely on stable teams capable of iterative development over years. And do not let the absence of public cancellation announcements trick you. Silence does not equal safety. Publishers pause, rescope, reassign projects without immediate disclosure. Internal cancellation can precede public cancellation by months. Internal restructuring can turn a lead project into a support role while maintaining external silence. Outside stakeholders must infer status through indirect indicators, hiring pages, role postings, leadership changes, outsourcing contracts, engine migrations, staff departures. Indirect indicators carry noise, but repeated layoffs are a strong indicator of strategic retreat or reduced ambition. Now we land the aircraft because this is where the credibility test sits. Credibility requires measurable progress, transparent communication, consistent investment signals. March 2026 reductions contradict a narrative of steady rebuilding, and silence deepens the contradiction. Silence denies stakeholders the ability to evaluate necessity, scale, and mitigation plans. It blocks assessment. Mitigation could include redeployment, severance support, relocation options, internal transfers, project clarity. The public absence of those details leaves only personal notes to describe outcomes. Personal notes cannot replace institutional accountability. Accountability, in a military sense, resembles chain of command clarity. A chain of command without public reporting invites speculation about strategic intent, and speculation never stays polite. Strategic intent is the central question for Warner Bros. Games Montreal because strategic intent governs staffing levels, platform targets, monetization decisions, and franchise commitments across years. The evidence available supports uncertainty rather than confidence. LinkedIn departures in March 2026, prior December 2024 layoffs, major February 2025 cancellations, and franchise restructuring messaging. Combined, it paints an organization managing risk through contraction. Contraction can be a phase, but contraction without visible reinvestment is just decline with nicer packaging. At some point you have to show the rebuild, show the milestones, show the staffing trend reversing, or the audience is not watching a turnaround, it is watching a slow retreat. Strategic recovery remains possible under disciplined command. Publish layoff numbers. Confirm studio mandates. Outline franchise roadmaps with dates and staffing intentions. Protect core teams. Invest in tools. Reward stable delivery. Treat developers as operational assets, not expendable overhead. None of that is radical. That is baseline leadership. And if this silence remains the pattern, then the next question is simple, and you already know it. What happens next time? Because there will be a next time, unless something changes.